1 million people. No cars, no electricity, no running water for most homes. Ancient Rome was the largest city humanity had ever built, and simply surviving it was an achievement. Its streets were a crushing mix of commerce, chaos, and raw human need. What you're about to see is not the Rome of legends. It is the Rome that actually existed. Before sunrise, the streets lie dark and empty. Shuttered shops line the lanes in silence, and only stray animals move through the deep shadows. But as first light breaks over the rooftops, the city begins to stir. At the gates, crowds have already gathered. Merchants, farmers, and travellers all waiting for entry. When the heavy doors swing open, the surge begins. Bodies, carts, and animals funnel through the narrow stone passage, scraping against the walls, pressing forward into the city beyond. Once inside, the arrivals scatter into the dense urban grid. Shop owners unbolt their wooden shutters, folding them down to form counters, facing the street. Vendors arrange their goods, pottery, tools, cloth, food, transforming the empty lanes into a continuous marketplace. Roman shops had no glass windows or doors. They opened directly onto the street, making commerce a public and visible activity. A pottery vendor sets out his wares: amphorae for wine and oil, cooking vessels, cheap clay lamps sold by the hundreds. A woman examines one, turning it in her hands, weighing quality against price. When she decides, the transaction is simple. Bronze coins dropped into an open palm, the lamp handed over in return. No receipts, no written records, just two people, a product, and an agreement. This exchange repeated itself thousands of times each morning across the city, the engine that kept Rome fed, clothed, and supplied. Not every transaction was quick. Cloth was expensive, and customers haggled fiercely. A buyer would test the weave, question the dye, and argue the price before any coins changed hands. Merchants expected this. Bargaining was how business was done. Nearby, the butcher offered fresh meat, though refrigeration did not exist. Animals were slaughtered at dawn and cuts sold the same day. Flies gathered quickly in the heat. Customers bought what they could afford and cooked it immediately. Pork was the most common meat in Rome. Cattle were too valuable as work animals, and beef remained a rarity on ordinary tables. Bronze smiths displayed their finished work at the shopfront: pots, tools, fittings, decorative pieces. Metalwork was essential to daily life, from cooking implements to lampstands to belt buckles. A good smith could make a steady living supplying the endless Roman appetite for durable goods. But the backbone of the Roman diet was bread. Bakeries operated. Throughout the city, their domed ovens burning from before dawn. Grain was milled on site. Donkeys walked in endless circles, turning heavy stones that crushed wheat into flour. The loaves that emerged were round, dense, and scored into wedges for easy breaking. For most Romans, bread was not a side dish. It was the meal itself. When Romans needed something hot and fast, they went to a thermopolium, an ancient fast food counter. Large clay pots set into the stone surface held stews, beans, lentils, and porridge kept warm over coals beneath. Workers on short breaks ate standing at the counter, bowls in hand. A mother and child might share a single portion. Street vendors nearby fried pastries over portable braziers, adding to the smell of food that hung in the midday air. Rome's aqueducts were an engineering marvel, 11 major channels carrying water from distant springs and hills into the city. But that water did not reach most homes. It flowed to public fountains, baths, and the houses of the wealthy. For everyone else, collecting water meant a trip to the nearest fountain, often several times a day. Women and slaves gathered at these fountains with clay amphorae and wooden buckets. They filled their vessels, lifted them onto shoulders or hips and carried them home, sometimes up 5 or 6 flights of stairs in the towering insulae. There were no pumps, no pipes in the walls. Every drop used for cooking, cleaning or drinking had to be hauled by hand. The fountain served another purpose too. They were gathering places, spots where neighbours met, news spread, and children played in the overflow that ran along channels toward the city's drains. In a city this dense, public spaces like these were where community happened. Beyond the main commercial streets, narrower lanes housed the craftsmen who kept Rome running. Metal workers hammered bronze at open-air forges, shaping tools, cookware and fittings. The ring of hammer on anvil echoed off the close walls. Nearby, cobblers stitched leather sandals by hand, footwear that wore out quickly on the rough stone streets and needed constant replacement. Leather workers scraped and cured animal hides, a process that filled the air with sharp, unpleasant smells. But perhaps no trade was more pungent than the fullers, who cleaned cloth in vats of water mixed with aged human urine. The ammonia acted as a cleaning agent, whitening and softening fabric. Workers stood in the vats and trampled the garments with their feet, then hung them outside to dry, fresh laundry, cleaned by methods no modern person would tolerate. Not everyone in Rome worked with their hands. Scribes offered their services on street corners, writing letters, contracts and documents for those who could not read or write, which was most of the population. For a few coins, a scribe could turn spoken words into permanent text, connecting illiterate Romans to the official and personal worlds that required written language. Barbers worked in the open air, shaving customers with bronze razors while pedestrians passed within arm's reach. There were no private salons. Grooming happened in public, another form of street commerce. Meanwhile, labourers hauled goods through the narrow lanes. Timber, grain, wine, building materials. Everything Rome consumed had to be carried in by human or animal muscle. Slaves swept the streets, pushing refuse toward the gutters, work that kept the city from drowning in its own waste. Most Romans did not live in houses. They lived in insulae, towering apartment blocks that rose 5, 6, even 7 stories above ground floor shops. The higher you climbed, the cheaper the rent and the worse the conditions. Upper floors had no running water, no heat except portable braziers, and no toilets. Cracks spread through poorly built walls, and collapses were common enough that Roman law attempted to limit building heights, with little success. Entire families shared single rooms no larger than a modern closet. Cooking happened on cramped landings over open flames, a constant fire risk in buildings made of wood and cheap concrete. Those who could not descend for every purchase lowered baskets from their windows, trading with vendors on the street below. The insulae were dangerous, uncomfortable and overcrowded, but for the urban poor they were the only option. Rome's population had outgrown any reasonable housing supply, and landlords built upward because they could not build outward. The Roman military was not confined to distant frontiers. Soldiers patrolled the streets, stood guard at intersections and trained in full view of the public. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal force, moved through the city in formation, and crowds parted instantly at their approach. This was not subtle. Roman power was meant to be seen. At the Campus Martius, a vast open field near the city centre, soldiers drilled in tight formations, shields interlocked, swords drawn in unison, feet striking the ground together. The precision that made Roman legions effective on battlefields across 3 continents was practiced here, in plain sight. Young men trained with wooden swords, learning the techniques they might one day use in actual combat. The military was not a distant institution. It was woven into the fabric of daily life. By late afternoon, the streets reached their peak chaos. Bodies pressed together so tightly that movement became difficult. Carts jammed in. The crowd, mules refused to move, and arguments erupted over prices, insults, and blocked paths. Street musicians played for coins most people ignored. The noise, the smell, the sheer density of human activity was overwhelming. A sensory assault that never fully stopped until the sun went down. As evening approached, the energy drained away. Shops closed their shutters and bolted them for the night. The crowds thinned. Lamplighters moved through the streets, igniting small oil lamps that cast pools of dim light against the growing darkness. Walls covered in scratched graffiti, names, slogans, insults, crude drawings, stood as silent witnesses to the thousands who had passed during the day. By nightfall, the streets were nearly empty. A stray dog wandered through the shadows. Rome, the city of 1 million, fell quiet, until dawn would wake it all again.